Stars
Podcast. This is the
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
Oh boy, what a fun one we have for today. You are not reading that title wrong. We are indeed going there on today's podcast. So buckle up and get ready for a good old-fashioned hard turd squeeze because it's pretty much how I felt spending my Sunday night checking out my first ever GCW experience. But we got to save the best for last, of course, so we will get to that toward the end of the show. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. This is the Five Starr Wrestling Report, here each Monday and Friday on YouTube and Rumble to bring you wrestling recaps, reports, weekend pay-per-view coverage, news coverage, et al. And of course, if you're checking out the show for the first time, welcome aboard. Thanks for joining. Make sure you smash the subscribe button. Keep the bell icon notified for when our posts go up. Like the show, leave a comment, and please just come check out the show every week. I'd appreciate all the support I can get. This is one of the very few wrestling podcasts out there that actually attempts to bring you honest recaps for wrestling shows, particularly when it comes to AEW. I bring you the good, bad, and, well, the ugly with every wrestling show we run down here on the podcast. And if you are checking out the Monday show for the first time, this is the show where we bring you AEW Rampage coverage and NWA Powerrr coverage from the previous week. And our final segment of the show is sort of a grab bag right now of all kinds of different things. I'm trying to experiment with different ideas, and thus far, our Monday show has had a handful of variety, whether it's WWE related or New Japan related, or in the case of today's show, GCW. And no, that is not garbage championship wrestling, as it's flippantly referred to. Although, after having watched that pay-per-view on Sunday night, I don't think that acronym is unjustified. But before we dive into that calamity, let us go over our first usual bit of business, starting, of course, with AEW Rampage from January 21st. Kicking things off with Jon Moxley's ring return in his match against Ethan Page. And for those of you that did not see my Dynamite report on the Friday podcast, you can go check out my recap of the Jon Moxley return promo, and you can catch up on any and all thoughts I have of Moxley, the wrestler. And, well, to give you a sort of brief summary of what I said, I've pretty much been of the opinion for a long time now that when it comes to promo work in particular, Moxley usually puts together really good material. He's one of the very few people that when I hear him cut a promo, I actually believe the words that come out of his mouth, which is something really hard to pull off in today's era with scripted sports entertainment promo work. When it comes to his matches, however, I just don't get that much out of Jon Moxley. I don't care for his ring style. The whole garbage deathmatch thing has really done a number on exposing the kind of wrestler that Moxley's always kind of been. And, while it was easy to hide that in WWE, I think Tony Khan has given him a little too much leeway in AEW when it comes to that stuff. But even when it comes to him working basic matches like he did here, again, man, I go back to what I said on Friday's show. I just don't get the feeling that his ring work backs up the intensity of his promo work. It wasn't a bad match, but it's every by-the-book, paint-by-numbers AEW TV match you've ever seen. It's mostly a back-and-forth 50-50 competitive match, goes to a commercial break, bleeding well over the 10-minute mark, and by the end of it, instead of it being a dominant showcase match for Moxley's big return to the ring, it really does nothing to get him over. Am I wrong? Am I just not seeing something? I don't know what it is, man, but there's a pretty wide gap between the promo character Jon Moxley and the ring worker Jon Moxley. I don't know if it's just the fact that he's not a particularly good wrestler, or maybe he's still trying to tie in elements of the stuff he used to do in WWE, but I just don't get the hype of Jon Moxley. And that sucks, coming from the fact that this guy was once one of their world champions. So I really didn't dig the layout or booking of the match, and I don't think it really did Mox any favors. Now, the stuff afterwards with Bryan Danielson and Jon Moxley doing the face-off in the aisleway, I like that. I mean, I just sat here less than 3 days ago and talked about the possibilities of what they could do with Moxley's first program back, and among those names I mentioned, I know Danielson was one of those guys. Granted, the anticlimactic way Danielson just kind of showed up left me rolling my eyes, but, you know, if that's something they're going to build toward the Revolution pay-per-view, I can get down with that. You know, Danielson's proven to pull a good to great match out of just about everyone he's worked with in AEW thus far, so maybe he can do the same with Moxley, who knows? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a Moxley-Danielson program was something that they had slated when they were doing that Eliminator tournament late last year, right? Weren't they like building to the big finals match with Danielson and Moxley at the Full Gear pay-per-view until Moxley went away? So, I mean, if this has been in the cards for a while and they've been wanting to do this program, sure, let's see where it goes. We had a rather amusing Jurassic Express promo with Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus calling out the Gun Club. My favorite part of the whole thing being the point where Jungle Boy reiterates Christian's line about the apple not falling far from the tree, and Luchasaurus just casually drops the line, "Apples." Say what you want about Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus' workers. I mean, they definitely got a lot of rough edges to smooth out, but I dig their promo work. It's usually fairly entertaining. And, you know, especially when you factor in that Jungle Boy's really coming along with this promo work, it's a good sign. And all Luchasaurus has to do is snarl and growl at the end, and it's perfect. I can't wait for the Luchasaurus t-shirts that come out that just read, "Ugh." I'd buy one. Then we get Nick Jackson versus Trent Beretta, which I thought was supposed to be Nick and Matt teaming up to go against Trent Rocky Romero. Yay for false advertising. Wouldn't be the only sign of that in the last week on AEW programming. Weren't we supposed to get FTR against Brock Anderson and Lee Johnson on Dynamite? Did they just, like, completely forget about that match, or did they can it? No idea. But you know what? In a way, I'm actually kind of glad we didn't get the tag match, because as insufferable and annoying as it is watching the Bucks on my TV screen, I've always preferred Nick over Matt, and a Nick Jackson singles match pretty much guaranteed lesser than normal stupidity when it comes to anything involving a Beta Bucks match. And granted, there was still plenty of stupid shit that Nick did in this match, but there was at least a concerted effort on his part to actually pull out some wrestling moves for a change instead of just relying on the usual trampoline backflips. As usual, though, typical of the Beta Bucks matches, they usually descend into complete illogical stupidity by the end. You know, especially by the time we get to the part where they're kicking out of everything and no selling moves, and everything just turns into a SmackDown versus Raw Xbox video game fuckery. But, I also understand that it's part of the Bucks' specialty. And, when I watch a Bucks match at this point, I basically have to shut down my brain and just watch it in a vacuum because I know nothing they do is going to make a goddamn lick of sense. But for some reason, they have it ingrained in their mind that in order to have a good, effective professional wrestling match in 2022, it means that every match must have 25,000 WrestleMania false finishes and big moves, and everything has to go 15 plus minutes. And when you have minimal understanding of pro wrestling psychology like the Beta Bucks do, I can see how you would draw that conclusion. I was actually kind of shocked that Trent went over clean, but I think by now we pretty much know how little meaning it is when guys actually do pin the Bucks clean. So it's not like it means anything. Remember when they put Isaiah Cassidy and Mark Quinn over and people thought they were going to be the next tag champions in no time? Now what are they doing? Playing Shadow and Matt Hardy and Andrade's clusterfuck faction? Way to go, guys. Doing a real solid job there. But whatever. Match wasn't for me, but I'm sure Dave Meltzer will give it 5.25 stars because he has no standards anymore. Hook killed Serpentico in relatively short order, which was easily the highlight of the show. And if Hook was like 5 to 6 inches taller and 40 to 50 pounds heavier, I could totally buy him as the next Bill Goldberg. And the whole thing with him dropping QT Marshall afterwards was also great. Like I said before, man, I dig what they're doing with Hook. And they're going about it the right way with having him rack up some easy TV wins right now. I do worry about the possibility of overexposure or, them trying to rush things with him and try to immediately launch him into a heated program with someone right away. But, if they're giving Taz the pen with this one and he's overseeing a lot of the booking for Hook right now, I'll take it. Just keep doing this shit with him and don't feel like you're obligated to immediately put him in a feud with someone. And the main event of the show, they actually went there. Anna Jay versus Jade Cargill for the TBS Championship on TNT programming. And that in and of itself is probably what I spent most of the match contemplating. So, AEW Dynamite moved to TBS starting on January 5th of this year. They created a TBS title, which in my mind I think, okay, so that's going to be a belt that's primarily defended on TBS programming, aka Dynamite. And Rampage is still technically airing on TNT every Friday night, yet Jade is defending the TBS title on the TNT show. All the while, next week on Dynamite, the TNT Championship is going to be defended in a ladder match on the TBS show. I don't know. And as we've clearly established by now, given her experience level in the business, Jade Cargill's matches would probably be best served in small doses, possibly 2 minutes or less to avoid overexposure, to put it kindly. So, of course, what do? Well, they let this go about 10. It was not very good, as expected. The worst part of it actually being a totally preposterous looking stalling deal from Jade, where she whipped Anna into the corner and took about a whole minute to do a basketball taunt. And meanwhile, Anna just had to stand in the corner and pretend like she couldn't get her boot up when Jade finally charged her. That was stupid. Again, the booking of Jade Cargill in AEW is just not productive with the way they're going about it. Once her matches start exceeding the 3 or 4 minute mark, you really start to expose her greenness. Jade Cargill is not the type of athlete that needs to go 50-50 with all the girls and let them get offense in. She should be walking in, minute or so of power moves, implant buster, 1, 2, 3, get out. Or whatever her modified chicken wing finisher is called. But the whole deal with letting her sell for long periods of time, letting her opponents get in offense, this is just... It's not a good use of Jade in the ring right now. You put the belt on her. So if your idea is to not immediately get it off of her and put it on someone else, fine. It's backing yourself into a corner, but you can work with that if you book her in short squash title matches and everything is get in GTFO. Even if she ends up running through the entire roster in the coming year, great. Fine. Who cares? Most of your division sucks anyway, so seeing Jade beat all the undercard green talents isn't going to do your roster any long-term damage. I know the concept is they probably don't want to hurt her feelings, so the idea is to give her the impression that she's all right working 10-plus minute TV matches, and the reality is that she's not all right in that situation. It's counterproductive, and it's just continuing to facilitate what all of Jade's biggest critics have already confirmed, that she's not ready for TV and she really shouldn't be pushed at this level given her experience. So I didn't like that match for that reason alone. It's not an effective way to book Jade right now. But all that said, I actually didn't hate the show when it was over. Because at least I could say this. Even if I wasn't a fan of a lot of the stuff they did on the show, I at least noticed an effort on their part to not try to cram in 8 weeks worth of content into 2 hours. The show felt less like all excessive wrestling and just felt like, well, the usual bad AEW programming we're used to seeing, which is by and large a massive thumbs up. Right now, Rampage is mostly being carried by the hook segments. So if we get hook squashes or pre-tapes every week, that'll pretty much be worth it alone. Everything else I can pretty much take or leave. And then moving right along here to NWA Powerrr from January 18th of the year 2022. A very weird show when it was all said and done. Which is kind of how I describe a lot of the stuff I see on NWA Powerrr these days. Just very strange, odd programming. It's not even to really say that it's all bad either, although some of it is. It's actually pretty much how I described it last week when I was talking about the show. They try a lot of different things, and some of it sticks well, and other times it falls flatter than a plate full of piss. And I think this episode had more of the latter than usual. And it kind of began that way with this show opening promo with Sion talking about Sal Rinauro. I have no idea why he was referencing him here, other than, I guess, to hype up a match for later on. But most of it was Sion trying to put over Sal for being a hardworking, legit pro wrestler. And if you've watched anything involving Sal on this program over the last, say, 2 weeks, you're probably wondering what the fuck Sion was smoking before he did this promo. So I had no idea what was going on here. This is what you would classify as a good old-fashioned swing and a miss. But I'll tell you something that was not a miss. And that was his promo with the booth with Mike Knox, Matt Cardona, and Trevor Murdoch. It didn't start off too great. It begins with Cardona playing music through his phone speaker, talking about how great it would be if he and Knox came out to theme music every week on the show. And then he spent another minute talking about how much the NWA sucks and it's boring and needs relevancy brought back to it again. And of course, when I think bringing back relevancy to the pro wrestling sport, I immediately think of the name Mike Knox, who has not been relevant in the business for well over 10 fucking years. And again, yes, people, I get that Cardona's a heel. And this is supposed to piss me off hearing him shit on how much the NWA sucks. But just because he's a bad guy, it does not mean that the promo material is any good. And thank God Trevor was out there to interrupt, because ironically enough, it was Trevor that actually brought relevancy to this very segment. Says, we don't need pyro here, we don't need music, and we sure don't need Cardona and Knox's bullshit. Says that the NWA has always been about pairing two guys together that have balls and have a score to settle, and if Cardona's got even a shred of testicular follicles, he will grow a set and face Trevor in the ring for a fight. And of course that leads to Cardona saying that if Trevor wants the fight, he has to go through Knox again, which is something they end up announcing as next week's main event by the end of the program. But goddamn, was that a real professional wrestling promo from Trevor here. You want to talk about a guy making you believe every word that comes out of his mouth? I highly encourage you to go listen to this Trevor promo. That was a passionate, button-down, old-school babyface promo. The likes that would make Magnum TA, Harley Race, and Dusty Rhodes proud. In fact, Trevor's delivery was so great here, not only did it get me genuinely excited to see him kick Cardona's teeth in, he actually got me semi-interested in the Knox-Murdoch title rematch next week. Yeah, getting me to care about a Mike Knox match in 2022. That takes real effort there. Our first match of the show was Kylie Ray versus Allison K. The only thing that would have made this more confusing if they would have thrown Kylie Ray from NXT in this match. Just way too many damn K's and Rays in female wrestling anymore. This is a really solid match, though. Kylie's matches have been relatively impressive every time I watch her. And it sucks. Like, the more I see of her, the more I start to kind of feel bad that things didn't work out for her in AEW a couple years ago. Because, God, if she was still with that company right now, she'd probably be one of their best female workers with girls like Thunder Rosa and Serena Deeb, too. You know, and that's not to take anything away from Allison here, because she was fine. And you know, obviously the whole deal here is them trying to plant the seeds for the eventual tag title match with, I think it's Kylie and Tootie going after Marty and Allison down the road. So that's all coming along well. Kylie won clean with the flash pin after reversing Allison's AK-47 finisher. And they did a nice job staying on everything after the match with the babyface team celebrating on the outside and the champ selling the frustration in the ring. This is how you build quality, compelling title programs in wrestling. You build up a dominant champion or champions over a period of time, and when you've got a set of credible challengers that you're teasing can win the belts, you put them over in a couple non-title matches against the champs just to give the illusion that the champs are in jeopardy. So I really like this segment. This was a circumstance of NWA reverting back to grassroots fundamentals and getting it right. Had a quick pre-tape with Mae Valentine, Kiera Hogan, and Camille. Not a whole lot to it other than layering in the drama for the upcoming Kiera-Camille title match down the road. And I wrote this down as a side note, but, you know, I don't mind throwing it in there. Camille's promos are really coming along on this show. You know, she's starting to sound more natural and comfortable in her delivery, and it doesn't feel so forced with her trying to act heelish on camera anymore. So, credit to her. She's doing a fine job in that domain. And again, effective old school booking done right here. And it just baffles me that much more when they follow stuff like this with the succeeding garbage we got over the next couple segments. We get this absolutely wretched WWE style promo at the booth with Fandango, JTG, and the Ill-Begotten. First off, we see the Ill-Begotten on the show like, what? Once every 4 months? So, by the time they come out here to interrupt, I have no idea who anyone is until the graphics show up on the screen, of which the only guy that got a graphic here was Captain Yuma, and the other two, I had no idea what their names were until later in the night when they came out from the main event. And, my God, dude. what even in the fuck is this Fandango JTG dirty dildo pairing they've got going on? I mean, the overly explicit sexual innuendo stuff with Fandango got old in WWE like 9 years ago when they debuted it. And meanwhile, here they are in 2022 still trying to replicate it, and it's still not any good. I mean, maybe it worked for the NXT crowd once upon a time, but I'm sorry, this crap has no business on NWA television. You want to make cock jokes once in a blue moon or have semi-androgynous characters on your show, fine, whatever. But for the love of God, cool it with the over-the-top WWE cartooniness of the whole matter. This is the kind of shit that kills any and all credibility that you have when you're trying to make pro wrestling legit on your show. When you allow crap like this to take place. You gotta cut that shit out. It's so bad. And that was followed with more garbagey promo work, this time from Homicide and La Rebellion. And I know the last 2 times I heard Homicide cut a promo on the show, I passingly made a joke about him being intoxicated while talking. At this stage, I'm like 99% convinced that he's legitimately drunk in these promo segments. The amount of nonsensical verbiage and speech slurring in this segment is beyond baffling. It was so bad, I'm honestly still not sure why they didn't just cut out Homicide's promo from the show entirely. And truth be told, I was so distracted by Homicide's bumbling and fumbling around here, I had no memory of anything La Rebellion said. Other than the fact that they're still the tag team champions for some reason. So we get our second match in a row featuring the girls, and it's Melina taking on Maddie. Yeah. Not Maddie Nichols or Maddie Lane or Maddie Thompson. No, just Maddie. Very marketable. Not that it matters because it was mostly just a showcase piece for Melina. But even with that said, I'll give her credit. Maddie was not bad here. Green as fuck, of course, but another scenario where NWA is scouting female talent that seem to have potential. It's funny, NWA seems to have a more comprehensible eye on potential talent than AEW does. But both girls held their own pretty well. A little bit of choppiness here and there, but nothing overly embarrassing that I could recall. They did try the old school New Japan spot where they both exchanged these stiff elbow shots on each other while they try to hulk up after each hit. And when you factor in that they weren't really laying into each other all that convincingly, it didn't look particularly good in execution. But by the time the show was over, the one conclusion I pretty much drew with the show is whoever booked the women's segments on this episode obviously had their head on straight, because at least the stuff involving the women came off like they were doing something resembling pro wrestling. The men's segments were the ones that were all over the place this week. And then we followed this with, another fucking segment with the girls. Luckily, this one featured Taryn Terrell, so I could just skip past it because of the social distance rule application. So we cut back to the booth with Kyle Davis and the Idolmania Sports Management crew. And aside from the sheer greatness of hearing Tyrus cut a scathing heat promo while vice-gripping Kyle Davis's wrist with the microphone, the only other thing I wrote down here is that they're all on the hunt for gold. And Tyrus also wants a future world title shot against Trevor once he racks up enough TV wins to earn himself a shot at the belt. Yes, a potential Trevor Murdoch-Tyrus title match in 2022. Strap in for that one. So we get the Dirty Dildos taking on the Ill-Forgotten and the Fixers in, I think, what ended up turning out as a handicap match. Although I'm still not exactly clear on what the setup for this was. I remember in the segment earlier on, Dango and JTG had made some horrible attempt at comedy by initiating a 3-on-2 handicap challenge against the Ill Forgotten because, well, 2-on-2 is unfair, you see, because the babyfaces are stupid. So that evidently leads to this match where the Ill Forgotten come out with the Fixers for a 3-on-2 handicap match, and it ends up being Rush Friedman teaming with the Fixers while the other two geeks wait on the outside, which apparently Yuma was not either clued in on or he wasn't fond of the idea because he ended up getting to a verbal jab with Friedman before the bell rang. And they proceeded to have a very forgettable match. And the finish to the match is Rush Friedman reaching into his tights and pulling out a check to give to the Fixers so that he could get tagged in and get the pin. So the story ended up being that the Ill Forgotten paid off the Fixers to do the dirty work just so Friedman could get the pin in the end for nothing that was on the line. Seems like an overly convoluted plan just to beat a goofball undercard tag team like the Dirty Dildos. All made more convoluted and strange given the fact that Yuma did not seem to know what was going on here either. Again, like I said from the beginning, it just seems like another case of them trying way too hard with the booking and overcomplicating things for the sake of overcomplicating things. Something like this, I just couldn't imagine ever taking place on NWA Saturday Night back in the day. And maybe that's my fault for using the TBS Superstation shows from the 80s as a reference point, but like if I'm trying to view the show in a bubble, it's like, if this is going to be the pro wrestling show that I'm supposed to take seriously, because God knows I'm getting it with AEW or WWE right now, I gotta use the old NWA model as a comparison point. And this is just another circumstance where modern day NWA booking just doesn't match up. So, another segment that I just really didn't get a whole lot out of. They get Rodney Mack and Anthony Mayweather at the booth for a promo. Rodney Mack being the sole highlight here by making mention of the fact that he knocked Jax Dane on his ass last week for mentioning his wife on camera. And, well, I will tell you for sure, after listening to Rodney Mack defending the honor of his wife here in a deep, intimidating bass tone, I would not be taking jabs at his wife from halfway across the country, much less in the same TV program. So Rodney was great here. And then we got the second part of this segment, which again, just way too wacky and low quality with the way this came off on television. It started off fine, Mayweather running down the chain of events involving himself and Jax Dane, talking about the fact that Dane is always going to find a means possible to cheat or sneak out a win. And this all leads to, as my notes read, a guy playing the role of attorney randomly showing up on screen mid-promo, completely unaccompanied or flagged by ring security. This non-wrestler, non-NWA employee just randomly waltzes out in the middle of this wrestling show, untracked by security, so that he could deliver a restraining order to Mayweather on behalf of his client, Jax Dane. And if that did not sound fake or phony enough, you should try to watch Mayweather and Kyle Davis react to this and read out the terms and conditions of the contract. Horrible. And even Joe Galli was so unconvinced with the delivery of this whole thing, he didn't even try to sell it as legit on commentary. And that brings us to the main event of Hawks Aew versus Jordan Clearwater and Marche Rocket. Yeah, that was the main event of this Powerrr episode. This wasn't a particularly good show, if you have not already figured that out by now. Not that I am trying to demean the credibility of the four guys in this match, but let's just say this. If you're trying to hook in eyeballs for a wrestling program and you announce your main event as Hawks Aew versus Jordan Clearwater and Marche Rocket. Not a very mouth-watering main event on paper. All things considered, though, match was pretty good. PJ was particularly good in this match, especially when he was standing on the apron reacting to the heels cheating. That was high entertainment. Very basic stuff for the most part, with the heels getting the heat on Luke. PJ got the fake hot tag with the ref sending him to the apron again because he did not see the legal tag the first go around. Ends up with Tyrus and Black G's getting ejected toward the end. PJ does eventually get the hot tag for realsies. Match broke down at the end with everyone in the ring doing moves, double teaming. Yes, getting overly ridiculous, of course, especially when you clearly just see the ref standing there and letting everybody hit moves, and he's not even attempting to count guys out. But that's modern pro wrestling for you. Every wrestler or every referee in the business is a complete dunderhead. And the finish is Luke and PJ hitting their pop-up power slam on Clearwater for the 3. And to tell you the truth, I was not even fully convinced that Jordan was the legal guy at this point, but by the end of the match, I didn't even feel like going back to check. But that was the end of the show after that. Babyfaces win clean. They defy the odds on the heels' advantage, and Austin Idol was pissed. Oh my God, speaking of the devil. Jesus fucking Christ. I take back everything I said about AEW having the worst commentary team in wrestling today. AEW has a lot of flaws when it comes to running their business. And as bad as their commentary is a lot of the time, dude, it doesn't even hold a candle to the turn the channel level of hatred I have for this Joe Galley, Austin Idol, Velvet Sky 3-man booth. It's beyond fucking abysmal. It is... It's so bad, I don't even know where to start. I know I've talked about how insufferable Idol is, especially when it comes to him bickering with Velvet for most of it. But he has somehow managed to get worse in this role the more they stick him at the booth. He talks over Galley for the majority of it. He never shuts up. Everything's either constant interruption or meandering and bickering for the fuck all of it. I can't believe they actually let this shit fly every week. Does anyone in the production truck not listen to this and realize how bad it is? Billy Corgan? Are you paying any attention to how bad Idol is at the booth? I mean, dude. What more proof do you want? Tim Storm's not the greatest color commentator in the world, but he at least knows how to shut the fuck up when he needs to. Austin Idol brings absolutely zero value as a commentator. Zero. At least when he's doing promos at the booth, it's like 2 or 3 minutes of him yammering on, and they get him in and get out and move on with the show. But 60 straight minutes of Austin Idol being annoying, beyond appalling. If there's one thing that legitimately infuriates me with the show right now, it's the commentary team. And the fix is so fucking easy. It's why I'm baffled they haven't addressed it by now. Just get Austin Idol out of there. He sucks in this role. And, if Storm's working the show, can't fill the void, whatever, either stick with the 2-person booth or find someone else to put in there, even if it's Billy Corgan himself. I remember they tried that. I think it was on last week's show, right? Maybe it was a couple weeks ago. But I know Corgan's done color commentary before, and he's certainly better than Austin Idol. I mean, I don't want to watch this entire show on mute, but they're really testing my patience by continuing to put Idol in the booth. So, relatively fine show, discounting the commentary. So now we get to the real main event of this week's podcast. It's time to talk about Game Changer Wrestling. My first viewing experience of a GCW show, and probably the last, if I'm being frank. Or maybe not, you never know. Depends on how much I'm in the mood to troll. And really, one of the main reasons I wanted to go out of my way to check out this show is that I knew they were going to be live from the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York. So considering that they were able to actually land a gig like that, obviously it goes to show that they were going to be putting in a little bit of effort when it came to production and presentation, and we will certainly get to that. Now, I should point out, first and foremost, that there was a pre-show part to the event, and, well, to maintain my sanity and not overindulge myself, I only watched the stuff on the main card. So as we are glossing over and running down things, if I outright missed any matches that may have taken place on the pre-show, now you know why. I didn't watch it. It was already enough of a struggle to sit through 3 hours of the main event card with this trash. I was not going to put myself through a pre-show. Although I could probably tell you most of this stuff was pre-show material. Right from the onset, we get the most legendary opening promo package I think I've ever seen in my life from a wrestling show. I'm not kidding. The opening promo is a bunch of dudes on the card talking about how much they suck and that they'll never amount to anything in a major wrestling organization. Thus, they find themselves here on this minor league outlaw show because they cannot cut it anywhere else. That right there, I could end the entire recap right there and not even have to run down the card. But given that I submerged myself into this bullshit on Sunday night, I'm going to take you all for the ride with me. By the way, no idea who the commentators were for this show. All I know is that they swore a lot, and both guys did their worst impersonations of Joey Styles throughout the night. And I think Ian Riccaboni was out there to call a match or two. Our first match is a multi-man clusterfuck grab the brass ring ladder match featuring Jordan Oliver, Tony Deppen, Jimmy Lloyd, who looked straight out of the homeless shelter, Alex Colon, PCO, God bless Carl Ouellette, man. They got him involved in this garbage outlaw stuff too. AJ Gray, and one more name that I did not catch in the intros. By the way, I should point out, grabbing the brass ring for what purpose, you ask? Apparently a world title opportunity. Their words, not mine. Gotta love the Vince McMahonisms. Can't say the word title shot or shot at the belt. No, everything's an opportunity anymore in pro wrestling. And they proceeded to do every car wreck spot-based match with ladders you've ever seen before, most of which looked very sloppy and horrible in execution. Everyone did 15,000 dives for no reason at all. The guy whose name I missed actually did one of the dumbest things I've ever seen in this match. A spot which included him stacking gimmicks on top of one of the geeks, and because he had no idea what he was doing, not only did he have to stop climbing a ladder in order to fix one of the ladders that he had set up on the ground, all in order to do this stupid dive onto the gimmick pile, but when he ended up getting to the top of the ladder, he lost his balance and came crashing down, almost landing on the back of his neck and dying. So I'm sure this guy will be out of the business in 5 to 10 years. To my surprise, there was actually a lot less dumb shit than expected in this match. I was half expected guys recklessly chucking ladders at one another's head, or guys lighting ladders on fire and doing double or triple decker 450 powerbomb splashes off the top rope onto said ladders that were wrapped in barbed wire. But no, most of it was just low rent, choppy looking spots where thankfully no one died. And it is also apropos of a garbage match in a garbage wrestling company that we get the obligatory spot at the end where the winner takes 10 fucking minutes to unhook the gimmick to win. So that was your opener, and a great omen of things to come. Second match was a 6-man lucha match with a bunch of dudes in masks, most of whom I had no idea who they were. I know Bandito was one of them. And they did a bunch of wacky, goofy, overly choreographed flippy moves. Lots of no selling, no effort to do anything resembling tag wrestling, zero logic to virtually everything that goes on, and of course, several near-death experiences. It actually reminded me of one of those old TNA X Division scramble matches we used to get back in the day. Just a bunch of interchangeable dudes, most of whom are the same height and weight, just doing moves. Including one of the dumbest fucking things I've ever seen in my life watching a wrestling show, where they attempted a spot with 6 guys holding one another up on their shoulders, while the top 2 guys did the fakest looking punching I think I've ever seen. And it concluded with one of the guys on the top of the pile giving the other a Canadian destroyer. How nobody died here, I will never fucking know. But that was the point where I completely stopped paying any attention to this and actually skipped ahead to the next match because I had completely had it with this one. So that match can go piss up a rope. Next up was Blake Christensen versus Lio Rush. Blake Christensen doing a promo beforehand where the only 2 things I wrote down are the following. He said, fuck a lot, because, well, you know, saying fuck is cool. It's edgy. It makes you seem legit. No, it just makes you look like a goddamn moron. And he also made an unintentional comedic mention that he came to New York to fight for not only the thousands of people in attendance, but the millions of people watching at home. I cackled. That was the highlight of the show for me. Hearing a guy in GCW think that there are millions of wrestling fans actually watching their product at home right now. They fucking wish they could draw a 16th of that number. Oh yeah, and Lio Rush is back. Guess he decided to unretire for the 83rd time in 6 months. And apparently this match was supposed to be a Ring of Honor World title match with Jonathan Gresham, but for whatever reason, he just wasn't there. Which sounds about right. Last minute card changes because guys no-show. There were a couple fine moments here, but I'm sorry, I just can't get into the move spectacle thing where there's nothing else to it. They did a lot of athletically impressive stuff, but I mean, I see all this shit every day in wrestling anymore. It's all moves, very little in terms of selling, creating anything resembling ring psychology. There's no real story or theme they run with throughout the match. Nobody works a body part. It's just moves. And if that's the sort of thing you're into, great. But when the video game ring style becomes the status quo in the business anymore, I mean, you can only watch it so many times before you start rolling your eyes. Although, in comparison to most of the other stuff I saw on the show, this was passably good by comparison. Then we get the Matt Cardona-Joey Janella match. The real highlight of stupidity on this show. And yeah, Janella's still a thing apparently. Hopefully for not much longer in AEW, if he's even still contracted to them. I really have no idea. I think I've been over Joey Janela since the match I saw him get a cigarette stapled to his forehead. And, I mean, y'all should know by now what I think of Matt Cardona if you pay any attention to my NWA Powerrr reports. And after seeing him in this match with Jelly Nutella, I now know that everything I said about Cardona rings true. He is perfectly suited for the outlaw garbage style wrestling more than anything else. I presume this was a hardcore match. Otherwise, I have no explanation for the weapon usage without either guy getting DQ'd. And by the time it was over, the plunder was the least of our concerns with how awful this whole charade was. One of the many angles in this match was the completely pointless part where Chelsea came into low blow Cardona, teasing that she was going to turn up and join with Janella. As if. And of course, it is a swerve, because she ends up crotching Janella on the top rope, and Cardona pulls out the cup from his tights. And of course, this spot that you would think would equate to a finishing sequence just another random part 5 minutes into the match with another 15 plus minutes of more bullshit. Because this company is retarded and the boys that put it together have zero sense of how professional wrestling actually works. And this leads to another completely pointless angle where in the midst of the match, for absolutely no reason, out comes smart Mark Sterling to inform Janella that he is not permitted to use Cardona's fake internet toy belt, otherwise he would be disqualified. But of course, they're allowed to use every other fucking weapon in the book, possibly including a chainsaw or a machete. But the fake gimmick belt, that's crossing the line. And by the way, I should also point out that Cardona laying down and pretending to sell in the corner while Sterling talked for like 8 fucking years with the match still going. Ridiculous. And the reason he comes out is so that he can bring out his special VIP guest, Vincent. Or Virgil, if you will. And Virgil's involvement in this match was to do what, you ask? Absolutely fucking nothing. Also, Sterling can run down to the ring to get killed by Cardona with the belt shot, so they could do another 5 minutes of more bullshit. Some of which included a random part where Swoggle came out from under the ring, just to get jumped by some big tub of lard afterwards. And then when you thought things couldn't get more retarded, here comes Marco Stunt. All of AEW's biggest collective waste of human plasma coming full circle on Garbage Championship Wrestling this evening. And, well, there's like half a dozen bodies in the ring doing all this random never-ending garbage. The only question I keep asking myself is, who the fuck is supposed to even be in the match? Somewhere in this complete mess, Stunt and Janella put Swoggle and Cardona through tables, which the camera missed entirely. Because outlaw wrestling be outlaw wrestling. Chelsea Green's out there running interference for most of the match. Ref's just fucking standing there with his dick ablaze, letting it all happen. And after all this garbage, after all this random shit happening for no reason at all, after guys are kicking out of everything in the book and doing everything to kill any and all credibility that professional wrestling may have left today, the finish to this terrible overbooked match is Brian Myers showing up under a helmet and helping Cardona put Janella through a plank of wood for the pin. And then X-Pac showed up. Why not? You already sent out the entire fucking United States Army to run interference in this match. Why not throw Waltman in there too? Who cares? So yeah, that sucked. That will probably go down as the number one worst match I've seen in the year 2022, bar none. And we are in January, people. If Jenna versus Charmel was -5 stars, this was -6 3/4. -10 if it would have happened in the Tokyo Dome. After this, we had a random brawl segment with Mance Warner and some dork with a septum piercing, which of course led to a bunch of other dweebs running out to join in a completely pointless brawl, thus getting absolutely nobody over, except for the guy that was over in a company that died over 20 years ago in Sabu. And it sucks too, because I actually kind of dig Mance Warner. I thought he was very entertaining on MLW a few years back, but of course they got him hooked with this horrible promotion now. Next match was Allie Katch versus Ruby Soho. So apparently Ruby is so inconsequential with AEW programming now, she is taking bookings with GCW just to try and stay relevant. And Allie Katch is not, in fact, the same Allie of AEW fame, or whatever her old indie name was. Was it Cherry Bomb or something? No, Allie Katch is just another interchangeable blonde female wrestler in the sea of already interchangeable blonde females that can't work. And I was going to go there, but probably don't need to dive into the pear-shaped body jokes. You know, after watching most of the people working on this show, Allie just kind of blended in with the rest of the out-of-shape goons who apparently spend more money muddying up their bodies with tattoos and piercings instead of, I don't know, paying for an annual gym membership or something. Luckily for me, this match was really no different from a lot of female wrestling matches I see every week, so I can just give you the brief tale of the tape here. The match sucked. Most of everything both girls did looked sloppy, botchy, and rehearsed. And instead of having the match go like 5 minutes, they tried to stretch it out to 15. Oh, and of course, the girls hugged afterwards. What else is new? Girls hugging after they have a match. Just 2 minutes prior, meanwhile, Allie is holding Ruby upside down on the top rope in the corner, teasing that she's going to give her a pile driver, thus probably killing her and ending her career. And then seconds later, they're turning around and having an emotional exchange like nothing ever happened. God, wrestling sucks anymore. But then we get to the match that had me glued to the screen from start to finish. Get this match. Effie, who apparently is some internet sensation that is an alleged future of the business, versus Jeff Jarrett. Yes, the Jeff Jarrett. Double J. Slapnuts himself. Broke 10,000 guitars, never drew a fucking dime, Jeff Jarrett. Mid-Carter for life, getting thrusted in the main event scene in 2 major organizations against guys 10 times the level of star power he could ever hope to have, Jeff Jarrett. That guy. Here in garbage championship wrestling to wrestle the second coming of Adrian Street. Actually, that might be giving him too much credit. More like the second coming of Rico. Jarrett, by the way, who came out with a horrid remix of his old TNA theme. But like I said, man, this match had me fascinated from beginning to end. Out of all of the guys that Jeff Jarrett could go out of his way to work with on this show, they put him with Effie. That is quite the pairing. But you want to know what the most damning thing about this was? This was probably the best match on the show. And go figure, it's mostly due to Jeff Jarrett working as an old school Southern heel while Effie worked as, well, something resembling an underdog babyface. But, I mean, granted, as much as this match had its stupid moments, I will give it this. It had heat. They told a story. It had a clear-cut villain and a protagonist. And while the overly effeminate Effie mannerisms aren't really my cup of tea, when it was time for the dude to make a babyface comeback, he made a fine little valiant comeback. And the finish is great with Jarrett clocking Effie with a guitar shot and hitting him with the stroke for the pin. Yes, Jeff Jarrett going over in 2022. Some things really never change in the business, do they? And if I had any faith or hope that anyone that worked on this show was going to matter in the business in the next 5 to 10 years, I could probably shit on the idea of that finish, but honestly, Jeff Jarrett going over here was probably the most logical finish on the entire show. Our semi-main event, GCW Heavyweight Champion Jon Moxley defending against Homicide. Begin the match with a "Fuck Bully Ray" chant, which is a story that I have not read all that much into, although I'm sure I'll look into it in my spare time. If it's coming from the mouth of Bully Ray, though, it's probably dumb. The very first spot they do in this match, fake, stiff-looking forearm shots to the head. The Moxley Special, better known as. There was a spot about midway through where Mox gave Homicide an overhead German right on the back of his head and neck. And if I had to venture a guess, I would conclude that Homicide was royally fucked up after having taken that move. Because from that point on, Homicide was wobbly walrus out there. Just stumbling on his feet. Everything he did looked slow and choppy. He really looked in bad shape. And after about 10 minutes of similar spots involving dudes getting dropped on their heads and necks. Moxley eventually hits the Death Rider on the chair for the 3. And he's still allegedly the world champion of Outlaw Mud Show Incorporated. Welcome back to the ring, Jon Moxley. But that all led to the main event. This open challenge match from the Briscoes for the GCW tag belts. And if you've been following the circulating internet rumors for a while now, there have been a lot of speculation over a particular Briscoe brothers dream match that people are clamoring to see. Part of me was half expecting it to happen on this show, but then the reality eventually set in. No, FTR are too smart to associate themselves with this bullshit company. If they're going to wrestle the Briscoes, it's either going to happen on AEW programming or ROH programming when they come back into the fold in the spring. No, instead, the challenge was answered by some fat guy named Matt Tremont, and the epitome of everything that represents Outlaw Mud Show Wrestling in 2022, Nick Gage. And no, I will not refer to him as Cornette commonly refers to him as, but if you do watch his podcasts, you know what acronym I'm referring to. I think I talked about this when I recapped ROH's Final Battle pay-per-view, but in case you missed it, I'll sort of go over my thoughts again on the Briscoes. I know they've been around forever, and I know they have a cult following. I've just never been that much of a Marker J. Briscoe fan. You see one Briscoes match in your lifetime, you've pretty much seen them all. And generally, I just never thought they were all that good in the ring. Their promos were usually entertaining, but as workers, it's very similar to what I see everyone else in the business do today. They do a million fucking moves, they kick out of virtually everything, their selling is awful, and they're just really awkward and klutzy in the ring. And I know that'll piss off a lot of diehard old ROH OGs out there, but I mean, I could probably count on one hand the amount of good Briscoes matches I've seen in my lifetime. Most of which happened around the period where they were wrestling the Kings of Wrestling or Haas and Benjamin. And that was probably around the time that Cornette was overseeing things in Ring of Honor and actually had a little bit of sense of how to pair teams together. Go figure. But the match sucked a cock. It was a bunch of spots with gimmicks, guys crashing through shit left and right, and they botched the finish with Gage getting the pin after the ref accidentally counted 3 after one of the Briscoes kicked out. A very fitting garbage way to end what was otherwise a garbage show from beginning to end. And Nick Gage doing that post-match promo and actually having the balls to say that GCW is the best organization in the world, that was all I needed to hear to know that I will never be watching another GCW show in my lifetime. 1999 to 2000 WCW Nitro is rolling in its grave right now laughing at that promo. The best organization in the world. Get the fuck out of here. God help AEW or WWE if they actually ever end up signing anyone on the show to a long-term contract. Obviously, the ones that aren't contracted right now, like Mox and Ruby Riott. But yeah, that was my first time ever / last time ever GCW experience. I went in with lower than usual expectations, and those low expectations were met and then some. A perfect encapsulation to what many people consider the number one indie fed on the market today. A product filled with low-rent, talentless, horrible-looking green air quote wrestlers with slightly better than average staging and production. Sort of a modern-day ECW minus the star power. In fact, the show was so lacking in star power that they actually had to let out the OGs from the stockroom for this one, with bringing out people like Sabu and X-Pac and Virgil. God, even Jeff Jarrett somehow got sucked into this vortex of assholery. Great show. Glad to know I'll never need to check another one out in my lifetime in the future. And I hope you enjoyed as well. Thanks for tuning in to this interesting installment of the 5 Starr Wrestling Report podcast. As always, I always say this, subscriptions are not as important in 2022, but y'all can do me a solid by leaving a comment down below and giving the show a like. And while you're at it, go ahead and smash the sub button and just stay notified when our podcasts go up each week. It's every Monday and Friday. Although this one might be edited a little more... let me try that again. This one will probably go up a little later than usual because my Monday schedule just kind of got really fucked up this week. So this show actually might be put out on Tuesday. But I will be back on Friday for our usual Dynamite report and the continuation of our retro review series, which will definitely be a good cleanser with going back into the archives and watching real professional wrestling. Knowing now that I will never have to put myself through a 3-hour water torture experiment with garbage championship wrestling ever again. Fuck that horrible show, and God help the people that actually think that this stuff is quality entertainment. Take care, all. Peace out.